Hello, hello. Can you hear me?
Mark, there you are. Okay, we're going live. Welcome. Warm welcome to the EBnet conference. I didn't see you live before. I'm not sure that you'll remember, but you and I actually shared a platform at an Alexander Forbes Hot Topic session probably about 5 or 6 years ago. And I must say, I was extremely envious of you. I was envious of you because I was dressed in a tie and a suit and standing on the platform, and you were there in your suits and sneakers, in your casuals. And I thought, wow, what a wonderful way to go. And now I can share the same platform as you. I now also wear my sneakers and jeans to work. So it's great what COVID has done. It's accelerated that particular issue, done a lot of bad things, but I like the casual part of the way we're going. So that was my first introduction to you. I know you're a passionate entrepreneur. I know you're a wonderful speaker. I know you love writing because I see your WhatsApps and your emails coming through on a regular basis. And I, like hopefully the rest of the crew and our listeners and viewers are looking forward to your talk. And I don't know what you're going to be really touching on is technology. And as we all know, it's made an incredible indent in our lives, in impact. And where are we? Where are we going? And wow, we've all been, kind of overwhelmed by Zoom, Teams, Google Meets, and all our lives have changed. It seems for good. Will we ever go back to life as we knew it? Without any further ado, folks, let me hand over to Mark Sham.
Thank you so much, guys. And it's wonderful to be here. I just want to make sure, because we live in this very technology-filled world, that you can all hear me and see me appropriately.
Yeah, that's an affirmative from my side. Shoot.
Yeah, man. So first of all, I want to just say thank you so much for having me. And I listened really intently to what Ryan Noach had to say. David, before I forget, the occasion you're talking about was around July 2017. I will never forget it. We did a road show for Alexander Forbes. And I think we still met at your office a few weeks or a few months later. And when I saw you here, I was pleasantly surprised. It's great to see you. And so thank you to everybody else who has joined. Obviously, from a time's sake, I want to move on. But I just want to give you a little look-ski around, because obviously even ourselves, we are in studio today. So if you ever see me look down, it's because I'm busy changing camera angles. I have the ability to go wide angle, close up, and then go to my full screen. So that's just to show you what's going around. So I actually want to talk to you a little bit more from the heart today. I don't want to just talk about technology. I think what Ryan Noach did so well is he painted a picture of where we're at with COVID and the real in-depth detail. And I was absolutely blown away by the detail, if I'm honest. I loved it. As someone who's originally got COVID myself and then been double vaxxed, I think that people, for the most part, just want to get back to normal. But I also think that normal no longer exists in the traditional sense. I think it never existed. And why I want to precursor that is I want to just put this idea forward to you that for probably the last 50 years, the world has been changing at such a rate. And every few years, we've seen this exponential curve. And the thing is that human beings aren't very good at dealing with exponential change. We understand linear much better than we understand exponential, but we've been living in an exponentially changing time. And I still don't even think that people fully understand that term. They hear about it, they know about it. And so the world has been shifting exponentially for really the last 50 years, and then time has been speeding up. And then COVID comes along and totally breaks down the last remaining institutions that were holding change back. And now we're seeing new rules emerging all the time. And so what I want to talk to you guys about today really is I want to talk about change, but more specifically the psychology that we need to adopt in an ever-changing world. I mean, you look at You look at the world at large just in the last 5 years, and then you look at where we're at now because of the last 2, and so much has shifted. And I think that, if you think about, just try appreciate that the world that we live in today is so vastly different compared to 18 months ago, and then compared to 5 years ago, 20 years ago, and 50 years ago. So what I want to do is I want to just take you through some brief slides that I want to actually show you in the strangest of ways. It has never been a better time to be alive, equally by the numbers. And I'm not a numbers guy, right? My nature in general is to talk much more to the heart. And I'm so glad that Ryan came on board and he painted this picture in terms of the shift and the psychological shift. And Ryan said something there at the end that really stuck with me, because I know this to be true for the people I speak to equally that are unvaccinated, is that there is much more of vaccine hesitancy. People are frightened. There's a very small group of population who are conspiracy theory-esque or are 100% sure of why they shouldn't do it. Most people are sitting on the fence, I think, because they're frightened. And it talks to a bigger issue, being that this world of unknown, we have entered into a time of so much unknown. What is normal anymore? When do we get back to the supposed normal? When will the economy recover? Will there be a fourth wave? What will it look like? Even where Ryan is talking about the data, it's really dependent on how many people get vaxxed and so forth. And so what I'm getting at is we're living in a world of unknowns. And I want to paint 2 opposing pictures for you. I want to paint the dichotomy, if I can, for you about where I think we're at. So like I said, I think that we are living in the most incredibly different world today compared to before. But I know that by the numbers, I know for sure that we are living possibly in the best time it is to be alive, even when you take COVID into account. And that some of the deepest frustrations we have in this world aren't caused by COVID. COVID is a symptom. It is not the cause. The real cause is this ever rate of change that we are seeing and that human beings simply aren't well adapted to. So the first slide I want to show you is a simple one. If you look over the last 30 odd years, you're seeing that extreme poverty has gone down significantly. Here we have a case of hunger. You'll see in cases where it is green, these countries have managed to decrease hunger by 50% or more. I'm not going to get into these very crazy, right? Child labor and hazardous work has halved since the year 2000. Okay, I would call that a good metric. Life expectancy has gone up significantly. Just keep in mind, right, that pre the Industrial Revolution, the average life expectancy was around 35. I'm 37. By today's standards, I am an absolute youngster. But by the 1750s standards, I was a gonzos. Okay, so you look at this number, right, and you see that average life expectancy has been shooting through the roof. Here we have literacy rates, right? Obviously, since the Gutenberg moment, we've had literacy rates shoot through the roof. Why this matters, quite simply, is it has aided to the ability for human beings to share information with each other, to document all of humanity's information and share it with each other, which I'll get into a little bit later. So literacy rates have shot up through the roof. Here we have a simple but powerful graph of more young people going to school more often and for longer. Education really is the great leveler. If you think about what education is meant to do, which I'll also get into a little bit later, it is meant to equip young people with the skills to be relevant in the future. So this is definitely a good thing. Infant mortality rate has halved since 1990, talking to incredible technological advancements in the medical field. Homicide rates, really, and beyond that, every other form of crime has reduced dramatically. You have to remember that just a few hundred years ago, the world was actually quite a gruesome place. There were very few rules in play. Nothing stopped me from simply walking into someone's tent or house, stabbing them to death, really, and, leaving without a trace. There was no forensics. There were no fingerprints, etc. Today, we live in a very guarded society where even by South African standards, the crime levels that we experience, which are quite high considering compared to the rest of the world, it's still really low. On average, we live quite a safe life. Okay. Here we have a case of the number of people, I guess, living in democracies has increased dramatically. This one is a real cruncher, the next one. Just in the last 10 years, people, we've added an access to electricity by an additional 1.2 billion people. Electricity is the great leveler, a lot like education, because it is a means to an end. When you have electricity, you have internet, you have phones, you have communication and connectivity. And then lastly, probably one of the greatest, although it's not fair to say that, is that you have more human beings having access to the internet ever before. And that number is increasing significantly. So if I could go into the detail equally significantly, but I spend an enormous amount of time traveling around the world, mostly before COVID, and now traveling virtually around the world from my studio here in Johannesburg. And I spend an enormous amount of time telling people, businesses, and companies that despite what the media may portray, despite how it sometimes feels emotionally, it has never been a better time to be alive by the numbers. But I want to tell you something that's fascinating to me. And it happened in December 2019 when I was making my way all over the world for my December holidays. I'm an avid traveler. I truly feel that travel is the greatest form of education any human being can take in. That's a story for another time. I was traveling and I was on a plane, and I remember watching a video by a guy called Scott Galloway. And in this video, he was talking about the idea that average life expectancy had gone up for the most part in the last 50 years. Right? In the US, they'd been recording average life expectancy in great detail, and that they had managed to move the needle from 60 to about 80 years on average. This is remarkable. But then he also said something that blew me away. I could never forget it. And that is, he spoke about this idea that at the time of the video, 2019, average life expectancy had gone down 3 years in a row, right? And we had never seen this before in modern history. And he was talking about this idea that when you talk about leading cause of death that is caused by humans directly, right? They used to have the leading cause of death that was man-made being car accidents with about 1 million plus deaths per annum. But then he speaks about this idea that figure, 1 million plus deaths caused by car accidents, had been overtaken by 2 new factors in the world at the time of this video in 2019. And those 2 factors were drug and opioid abuse and suicide. So what you had is for the last 3 years, from around 2019, average life expectancy dipped 3 years in a row, first time in recorded history. And this blew my brain as I was sitting on a plane, making my way abroad, thinking to myself, how is this possible? I spend so much time telling people that it's never been a better time to be alive. And here's what I realized. It may be indeed true that it's never been a better time to be alive by the numbers, but it has also never, ever been a more complex time to be alive. Never been a more complex time to be alive. So when you think about it, I believe this picture that I'm showing you right here is really reminiscent of the feeling I had when I was a little boy, right? I remember being 10 years old and thinking that when I got to 30 or 40, I was going to know everything. I was going to have it all figured out. And it turns out that this is totally untrue. It turns out really that you never become the adult you thought you would be when you're 10 years old. It turns out that at 37, at 50, at 80, you're just winging it. We are all just grown up children in adult bodies. That's it. So why do I mention this? Because what's happening at this point in time is that the complexity that we're facing in the world at large, again, hasn't been caused by COVID. It's certainly been amplified by COVID in my mind. But you can see, even by the data, we're starting to come out of the worst of it, right? So I think of this all the time, and I am trying to help people reimagine their lives psychologically. How do we deal with this ever complex world? How do we deal with the fact that you have COVID? How do we deal with the fact that the world is changing at a pace we've never seen before? Okay, so what I want to do is I want to take you through a little idea of where we've come from to where we're going, where we're at now, and why. Are you with me? Here we go. So I want you to imagine that the world is a very different place 50,000 years ago. Okay, and that was because the world worked in a very local and linear way, right? You lived in the same place, you ate the same animals, you used the same stone tools. And the only thing that impacted you on a daily basis was the stuff that you could see and hear, right? Nothing more than a day's walk would impact you in your life. If something was happening around the other world, you didn't know. And also, to add to this, your life moved in a very linear fashion, but the conditions that your grandmother or grandfather operated under were the same conditions you operated under. But today, we don't live in a local and linear world. As you even just look at the data by Ryan Noach's terms, we now live in a global and exponential world. Global because look at this. I'm sitting in a studio inside of Johannesburg and we are effortlessly beaming out this information. I'm sitting with 3 camera angles here and the ability to go widescreen. And you could be watching this information whether you were sitting in Johannesburg, in London, or in Singapore. Okay. And then certainly exponential. Our lives have changed dramatically because if I just compare my life to my grandmother's life, you cannot begin to compare what our lives look like, what daily operations look like for my grandmother at 37 compared to me at 37. You really just can't compare these two. So if it is indeed true that these worlds are moving so far apart that for the most part in history, people's lives were local and linear, and now they are global and exponential, the question is, what is causing this rate of change? And I think the best way I can answer this, and I don't want to spend too much time here, is I want to just explain to you how time marches on. Because I have a very simple theory that you can draw a direct parallel between rate of change and the rate at which change accelerates in the world. I can draw a direct correlation between that and the rate at which human beings share information with each other. I think that that's what's fundamentally driving this major evolution in the world, is that what's been happening for the last 50 years is that human beings are starting to share information with each other at the speed of the internet. The way I can explain that is if you go back 50,000 years ago, you could argue that the world was local and linear by nature because information sharing happened at the speed of the campfire. If you were George and you discovered fire, the next person didn't know about your discovery unless they were in close proximity to you. So I think about this all the time. What's been happening for the last 100,000 years is that human beings have been slowly but surely creating technology that has been enabling us to share information with each other faster and faster. And the more we do that, the quicker we share information with each other, the more technology evolves, the more we start to build on top of each other's thoughts, ideas, and technologies. And eventually what you have is this compound interest effect of change. But what we saw in the last few years that's made the difference is that digitization has been the game changer, right? Is that for the last 100,000 years, information has been moving at quite a pace. We've been building on top of each other's thoughts and ideas, technologies. But the one major game changer is that ever since digitization was introduced into the world, the fact that now technologies improve at an exponential rate, 1 doubles to 2, doubles to 4, doubles to 8, doubles to 16, and so forth. We have never seen that kind of exponential improvement. I'm actually making my way to the UK tonight. And because we don't have the new iPhone 13 here in South Africa, I am making my way to an Apple store to get it. And it is just 2 years ago that I got this iPhone. And what's frightening is you cannot compare remotely the speed at which this new phone operates, the iPhone 13 compared to the 11. It's just chalk and cheese. The camera has gotten so much better. It's unbelievable. And never before in history have we ever seen that rate of exponential change, right? So again, digitization is changing everything because now what's starting to happen is that human beings are starting to share information at the speed of the internet. Are you with me? And I want to give you a little example, right? Just to show you how funny it is. I mean, I use this example a lot, but look at the history of hard drives, right? You go back to the year 1956, 5 megabytes, which is the equivalent of a picture that we take with our cell phones today, would cost you $120,000. And you would effectively need a cargo airplane to move your picture and your hard drive from office to office. You know, you talk about just a few decades later, we could suddenly fit 128 megabytes on your pinky for a fraction of the price. But then again, in 2014, we had improved in 9 years. We had improved virtually 1,000-fold. And I love using those old examples and keeping them there, because can you imagine in exponential terms the sheer rate of which we have improved ever since 2014? It's not just 7 years, it is 7 exponential years, right? So again, when you look at the history of hard drives, you can just see exponential improvement compared to linear. But here's the clincher. What's really starting to happen is that convergence is really the thing that's catching us. And I want to explain convergence for 2 seconds. So if you think about it, you have all these old technologies. You have all, should I say, 50 years ago, you have all these brand new technologies, AI, computers, robotics, processing power, all of these things starting to improve exponentially. And slowly but surely they converge on top of each other. A perfect example is your phone, right? If you go back 50 years ago, you would have to say that your phone was probably 50 separate devices, a separate phone, a separate calculator, record player, map book, encyclopedia, right? You name all the uses for your phone. All of these were separate items, but separately, they all became digitized, started to improve at Moore's law, and one by one, they started to converge on top of each other, now into this thing we call a phone. Ironically, the thing we do the least with it. So what you have is when you have all these technologies converging, they start to offer a democracy of access to the masses. Technology creates democracy. You can consume all of the world's information on the internet if you have a phone and an internet connection, and there are billions of people around the world who do. So this is, sometimes I get a little confused with my little button setup here. So convergence is now starting to improve at Moore's law, and you have this idea that human beings don't just have to deal with the rate of change. They don't have to just rewire their brains for exponential living and complexity. They have to imagine convergence in many different spaces. So going back to this example, what you had was a processor, right? In 1996 and 1997, you had a convergence of a whole bunch of technologies converging into this eventual piece of software and hardware that landed up beating Garry Kasparov at chess. But the crazy part is that that same piece of software and hardware that beat Garry Kasparov at chess has now started to jump into other spaces and areas. So, you know, you go back 1996, could you have ever imagined that a piece of hardware and software that beat the best chess player in the world would start to converge into the medical space, would start to converge into all sorts of other spaces and start to take people's jobs, like in the legal space, where that same piece of hardware and software is now able to statistically analyze millions of documents within minutes and remove some of the research department at the largest law firm in the world. That is a pretty crazy thing to imagine. So like I said to you, convergence is really the thing that's catching us. And so I guess the question is, where does it leave us? What do we do? And the answer that I want to put forward to you is quite simply that we are in a time, we are living in a space where human beings have to contend not only with an incredible rate of change, we actually have to rewire our brains and we have to rewire our psychologies. Okay, so for time's sake, for the fact that we only have about the 45 minutes, I just wanted to spend a little bit of time setting a context that we are indeed dealing with a rate of change that we have never seen before because of technology. Technology is the great enabler of the fact that human beings can share information with each other at the speed of the internet. And so everybody in this world, because they have democratic access to all these technologies now, pretty much everybody around the world has a phone. People have laptops, people have internet access. What's happening is that by virtue of a phone and internet access, all human beings have democratic access to technology. And so we're using these pieces of technology to really build on top of each other's thoughts, ideas, and technologies. We're creating this compound interest effect of change, but our brains are hardwired to understand linear movement, not exponential, and it's creating all sorts of complexity effectively. So again, the question is, where to from here? And this is what I wanted to spend a little bit of time with you on. I want to make the first bold statement if I can, and that is this. This is not 1996, but faster. The best way I can try help people to deal with the psychology of change is to understand that we aren't living in 1996, but a little bit faster, a little bit more, a little bit better. In fact, I would argue that we are currently living in a time where the rules are completely different. And the way I try to explain to people is the things that you did to get here, the things that you did to thrive up until now, aren't going to be the things that you will need in a future time. And so in the craziest of ways, it doesn't matter what work experience you have. I don't want to say it doesn't matter at all, because of course experience matters. But I want to say that your experience matters, but only to a point. The degree that you may have got 20 to 50 years ago only matters so much, right? Because that degree was only really relevant in that time. If you didn't keep up the learning, if you don't continuously force yourself to adapt and to change, suddenly you are left with very little. And I see this all the time. I see highly successful people that become strangely irrelevant very fast on the back of not keeping up, on the back of resting on your laurels, on the back of the idea, look at what I've achieved so far. So I can't stress this enough. The things that you did to get here aren't going to be the things that you need to thrive in a future time. And as such, a new psychology is needed. I would say the first major shifter that we need to understand is the shift between linear and exponential. That we come from a time. Are you guys still with me?
Yeah, we're still, yeah.
Okay, great. Sorry, I just heard a click there. We are living in an exponentially shifting time, but in a world where we came from, we have still these deep roots in linear thinking. And so what I've actually seen, in a strange way, what's causing a lot of the confusion for people is that we kind of living in a world where we have 1 foot in the old and 1 foot in the new. And we're hurtling toward this new at quite a rapid pace, but we can't tell which set of rules apply when. So the complexity has never been greater. There's never been more information coming at us. We have never had more decisions to make. And the crazy part is, however fast you think it is right now, the future is going to be even faster. It's speeding up. So when I say we have to understand and deeply study this concept of linear versus exponential, it really matters. The next thing I would say is that we have to all educate ourselves deeply. Now, a lot of people don't understand this term. And the problem is that when you think about education, you often think about school, right? I went to school or university and now I'm good. But my argument in a deep way, again, is that all people need to be constantly educating themselves all the time, right? And so I think about education slightly differently. I think education is the process of understanding the future, then gaining the necessary skills to be relevant in this time to come. This is the thing I think matters. And so what I've seen is that we have kind of confused education with degrees, when actually, in a strange sense, education is a lot more about skill acquisition, about understanding your current terrain, I would argue that education is a lot about gaining self-awareness, which, by the way, when we were young kids, this term was tossed around often, self-awareness. We thought that it was just something, because it was spoken about in broad terms, that suddenly everybody has it. But like common sense, you often hear that it is not so common. I would argue that self-awareness isn't so common either, because self-awareness is a practice that we have to continuously induct ourselves into. And a lot of people kind of go, no, I'm cool now, I've got it. I mention self-awareness because really this has become some of the major skills that we will require in this new world, is to constantly understand our landscape and then adapt accordingly, which means that now people have to become forever educated. It means that the real mark of success in this world is someone who can become a self-directed, continuous learner using formal and informal education. It's the reason why my company is called Suits and Sneakers. It's the idea that formal is great, but it is one version of education. And we can't, as adults, keep going back to university every 3-4 years, pausing our livelihoods. But we have to keep adapting. And as such, we have to become self-directed, continuous learners. And so this is why I think that digitization, in as much as it is as causing this incredible rate of change, it will ultimately make us more human. I actually believe that because digitization brings about with it a democracy of access to information, it allows more people to become self-directed, continuous learners than ever before. We're going to see this major shift. And I can't stress this enough, that the future of learning is not just about degrees, it's about skill acquisition. And it's actually about understanding the greatest misnomer in the universe, which is value creation. Value creation is the #1 skill set in terms of hardcore skills that we should be taught at school. What is value creation, right? If you think about it, my friend Alon Reyes has a really beautiful explanation of value creation. And he talks about it in the sense of business. He says that, in a sense, there is no secret to business. Business is just the constant discovery of what is valuable to whom, how to efficiently create that value, and how to widely communicate it. I love that. We should be on the hunt for understanding what is valuable to whom, how to efficiently create that value, and how to widely communicate value. That is it. If you want your kids to be relevant in the future, it's not solely about maths or English or science. And indeed yourselves, if you want to be relevant in the future, it isn't about being a better accountant. It is about understanding where we're at, where we're going to, why, and then having this very difficult ability to rewire your brain constantly. And it turns out that human beings, we're very good at change when we are forced to create change, or when it is necessary. But we aren't very good at constantly adapting and constantly changing when there isn't this immediate force or pressure. And so in a sense, change is really a practice that you have to endow into your life. And it is easy to talk about, but very hard to do, because like most practices, you have to get up and do it every single day. And so it shows you that we have a much more psychological issue than we have a hard skills issue, because that is kind of the problem that we're facing today, I believe, is that right now, your brain is effectively an app. And in that, your app is requiring constant updating. But here's the real clincher. Alvin Toffler had a beautiful saying that I have been using nonstop. He says, the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. Now, I think the topic of unlearning has become a little bit bastardized in its own right, but it speaks to a greater truth. And here's my problem, is that when we go to school, we are effectively being taught how to be successful 20 years ago, right? When you look at a lot of formal education, it doesn't always get to the heart of the skills and the psychology that you will need to face this ever complex world, which is why you have the most educated society on the planet, and yet more people are pulling the plug on their own lives through drug and opioid abuse and suicide right? In the greatest time to be alive. And I would argue this is largely because we weren't taught to deal with the rate of complexity that we're currently experiencing. And we're certainly not well equipped for the rate of complexity that is coming our way in 5, 10, and 20 years. More than anything, I believe that we need an education revolution, and more specifically, a psychological revolution than anything else. And again, I know this is easy to talk about in broad strokes, but hear me out. One of the major problems that we're facing today in 2021 and beyond is that we talk about all the skills that you may need at work as hard skills. And then we do this thing where we talk about learning how to be happy, learning how to have a relationship with pain, learning how to have a relationship with self, learning how to deal with conflict. Have you noticed, like, people have got this weird thing where we don't even know how to debate elegantly anymore. I watched so intently with what Ryan had to say about the vaccine. And don't you think it's the craziest thing that in 2021, we get afforded this beautiful gift because of technology in the form of the vaccine that can dramatically reduce death and hospitalization. And we've just had it so good for so long that we don't appreciate how good we've got it. And so you have people turning their nose up at the thing that can save us. We don't even appreciate that in 1918, when the Spanish flu hit, they kept holding prayer vigils to pray the virus away, thereby spreading it more. In 2020, we managed to sequence the genome of COVID within 2 weeks and then open source that information to the entire scientific community. But here's the problem, is we also haven't been taught how to deal with this incredible complexity. Unlearning old behaviors is a much more psychological issue than it is just a hard skill thing. So I am starting to argue that we should stop looking at these skills like relationship with self, psychological, our relationship with pain. You can just see it by the number of suicides around the world gaining traction, that people don't understand how to deal with this rate of complexity. And it's because we call these skills soft skills when they are actually core skills. And so why I'm going off on this tangent is that we have to start looking at the things that we will need in the future. We need to start shifting the priority on those things. We need to start thinking about mental health in the workplace. We need to start thinking about adaptation and change as a subject that everybody should be engaging in on a continuous everyday basis. Because I've seen it with my own eyes, that in the old days, we simply used to value this thing called IQ, right? Intelligence quotient. But we are now starting to see a grave shift in what people need, right? In that 20 years ago, we started talking about EQ, and there is no question that EQ is vital, especially in the workplace. It is not IQ alone that takes us forward. Otherwise, every mathematician and scientist in the world, they would be billionaires, and that is not true. In fact, these days, you have someone like me who uses the internet to constantly reframe and understand the context of the world and constantly gain new skills to create more value. And then the same guy without a matric, the same guy without any formal education can start a business, hire people, and then get hired by other companies to reimagine learning and what that looks like in the workplace. It shows you the institutions, the foundations that we used to experience and understand have shifted. And so I think much more now that we need to focus on this combination of intelligences, the adaptability quotient, coupled with EQ, coupled with IQ, the ability to move fast, the ability to adapt, the ability to understand self. We used to regard these as soft skills, but now I argue that these are core skills. And you can see that they are not necessarily being pushed in the workplace. So I can't stress this enough. AQ plus EQ plus IQ is very much what we're going to need. But I want to run you through the even greater idea, which is that we're seeing not only in life, but in the workplace, that we've come from a time where we had factory thinking, where the schooling system produced this factory-like thinking, right? You go from grade 1 to grade 2. It is a paint by numbers system that moves you through a system that really was designed to make people better factory workers. But if you think about today, the thinking that we are requiring is much more laboratory thinking. And what I mean by that is our ability to constantly throw darts at the dartboard, experiment and understand. But the weird thing that's happening, not only in the workplace, but in life, is we talk about people making mistakes as a good thing. You learn from your mistakes. But then society slaps you on the wrist the second you make the mistake. You can see it in schools, right? Mistakes are good, boy. Did you get something wrong on your test? Bad, naughty, right? Same thing in the workplace. Mistakes are good. Experimentation is good. Well, here's the thing. In order to experiment, in order to throw darts at the dartboard, you have to be okay with the idea that you will get something wrong. You have to be okay with it. And yet we regard mistakes in the workplace as bad. And I see this all the time, because what we're actually requiring, in a strange sense, is we're requiring companies to have multiple engines running at the same time. Okay, we're requiring companies to have their existing business model and engine room moving here, right? The thing that is currently generating your revenue and keeping you alive and paying the bills. We need that constantly chugging along here. But then at the same time, we need the second engine of constant experimentation, of innovation, of disruption here. The problem is these two don't actually work very well together, because the old engine has a deep immune system that wants to kick out experimentation, that wants to cut all mistakes being made. And yet what I'm trying to explain to companies is that not taking a risk is a risk. I'm trying to explain to people at large that not taking a risk is a risk. That by standing still or by moving slowly, you are moving backward in this world. And so again, you look at what are the skills that we will require in this future world to thrive, to be happy, to be content, to be fulfilled, to live a good life. Well, it's not the things that we did to get here. So take it from this perspective. I always think about innovation. These days, it's much more about understanding customer need states. But of course, that's a whole different ballgame, because customer need states are changing so fast. And so we do what we always did. We don't create this open and beautiful space for collaboration, for innovation, and largely for experimentation. And then the world passes us by. And the way I've always tried to think about it is, in a before time, if we go back 50 years ago, if you were a company that had 5,000 staff, you had 5,000 horsepower. But today, you can be a company with 20 people, some capital, and technology, and suddenly you have 5,000 horsepower. But with one major exception, you aren't bloated and fat and slow moving in fast-moving waters. So again, we are being forced to deal with this incredible rate of change that is coming at us. We are being forced to deal with more complexity, more decisions. And yet what we keep throwing at the problem is effectively more hard skills. Go learn Excel, go learn how to code. And I'm starting to disagree. I'm starting to say to people, the necessity of the future in order to thrive in this time to come is going to be more psychological than it's ever been, which means we have to start to reframe what is important. So I want to give you a great example. Here you have Capital One Bank, who did something fascinating, right? They wanted to talk to the millennial market a few years ago. And it just shows you that this wasn't just a skill change, but it was a strategic one. And so what I went a little bit forward there. So what they did was they decided to take about 15 of their branches and experiment. And they took these old banking branches and they turned them into a combination of co-working spaces, yoga studios, and coffee shops. And the most amazing part about what they did was they allowed young people to come in and access these spaces for free, right? And their whole idea was playing the long game and adding value to these youngsters. Their feeling was, if we could add value to young people, and their bankers and their yoga the yoga instructors and their baristas were also their bankers, and they would help them and offer them advice and create a beautiful environment for them. Well, they figured that this long-term value add would drive a new area of growth for their business. But you've got to understand that in order for this bank to get this right, it wasn't just about making another banking move. In order for these banks to do this, they had to shift and converge. Pardon me. They had to shift and converge from banking thinking to experimentation. They had to become a laboratory, not a factory. And in doing so, they created one of the greatest moves in the banking history in the last few years. Capital One starting to pull immense favor with this, this new market. So I'm trying to get at a heartfelt point to you today. I'm trying to get at this idea. I'm trying to get to that for the longest time, we have been trying to educate the head. We have been trying to educate people on this head front, and we have been throwing hard skills in them, when really we are seeing a throwback to the heart. We are seeing a time where, to thrive in this future time, we indeed need to understand that it will be a psychological shift more than ever before. And that we need to be able to retool ourselves and rewire ourselves on the daily in order to deal with this rate of change. And at times, I understand it is absolutely exhausting. But let me tell you something. COVID didn't create our problems. It just amplified it. COVID didn't create the complexity the world has been currently experiencing for the last 50 years. COVID amplified it. And so if I could leave you with anything, it is indeed this idea that when you put all your time and your effort into educating your head, this is indeed a beautiful thing, but you can only fill up a swimming pool so far. I would argue that starting to educate your heart, which sounds like a very hippie thing to do and to say, you have the capacity of the ocean. More than ever, when people come to me, they say, okay, what does the future look like? And I say, I have no clue. I can't tell you what to do in the future. I can only tell you who you need to be. And here's what I've learned. The future doesn't care how you became an expert. So our over-obsession with degrees, I'm not saying degrees are bad. I'm simply saying our over-obsession with formal education is what will get us in the hole. For you to understand this rate of change, you need to be constantly updating your software. You need to be constantly reframing how the world works, what's going on, what is valuable, how do you efficiently create that valuable, and how do you widely communicate that value to people. You will always have a job, you will always earn an income if you understand value creation. But I argue that beyond the hard skills, I can't tell you to thrive in this future, you've got to be better at Excel, or the future is really getting into Bitcoin, or the future, it's not about what to do. The future and thriving in this future is about learning who to be. It is indeed true that we need an education revolution more than anything. We need to help people understand that the rate of change that we're experiencing right now at large is faster than we have ever seen. And it takes a psychological shift to turn into the type of person that can shift on a dime, that can lose and disconnect from old identities. When COVID hit me and I couldn't run events anymore and I couldn't speak for a living, for a moment I realized that my identity was so closely connected to being a speaker and a writer. But what COVID helped me do was reshift to become a value creator. I am a value creator through and through. That is my goal. That is my heart. And to create value, I constantly try to become a self-directed, continuous learner, trying to constantly understand the world around me and make it a better place. I may express that through writing, through speaking, through whatever. It allows me to no longer see myself as a noun. I am no longer a speaker. I speak. I am no longer a writer. I just write. This has allowed me to shift and move on a dime when it came to COVID. But I think of all the changes we have to make, it is deeply psychological. It is going back in a sense of learning how to have a relationship with pain. We have spent so many years trying to avoid pain or numb pain. And whenever you bring up these topics, you watch people go like, oh, no, not here, not in the workplace, not wherever. And my argument is that is the exact revolution that we need, that men need to stop pushing onto other men, big boys don't cry. That we need a new revolution where we express our feelings and our emotions and we stop regarding that as soft or weak. Because when you look at the suicide numbers, when you look at the drug and opioid abuse numbers, it is clear. It has never been a better time to be alive. It has never been a more complex time to be alive. The things that we did to get here won't be the things that we need in the future to thrive. And so I argue that we should stop looking at what we used to call soft skills in that way. We need to start thinking of them as core skills. Your ability to change, your ability to adapt, your ability to deal with pain and conflict, your ability to experiment, your ability to disconnect from your identity, your ability to stop saying you're old because of age, to stop coupling age with how valuable you are in the world. Your language, the ability to become aware of the language, the importance of the words you use on a daily basis. I see even my own friends saying at 35, I'm old. I want to take them and strangle them by the neck because they are reinforcing a mentality, an outdated psychology. I am old. That we need to revisit and question every facet. And this takes a reinvention of how we see the world, but mainly how we see ourselves. So if I were to argue about what we need more than ever, I think we need a psychological revolution more than anything. Change is indeed coming. There's no question. It is speeding up at a rate we have never seen. I know this for sure. I'm a product of informal learning. Thanks to the internet, you can pretty much learn anything, anywhere, anytime at no cost. The one clincher is you just don't get the certificate, but the certificate doesn't equate to the value anymore. Right? Skills are valuable whether you get a piece of paper or not. And so, wrong button. And so I leave this with you, the heart. If Ryan Noach gave you the information from a headspace, and there is such a beautiful space for that. I can't stress enough. I watched Ryan Noach's talk with everything in me. I found it fascinating to understand insights and data. But this is what I would leave with you, is that as much as we need to educate the head, we need to educate the heart. And if you think that doesn't matter, call this an I told you so moment in the next 5, 10, and 20 years. You can reinvent yourself at any point in time, but you need a psychological rebirth to become the type of person that can constantly shift on a dime. But here's what I know for sure. You will see the difference between the people who do the daily work, the daily self-directed continuous learning. You will see the difference between the people who continuously update their firmware and their software, and you will see the difference between the people who don't. We are seeing more than ever a rise in inequality, but not just financial, in skills inequality, in opportunities inequality. But at the same time, the internet has democratized access to information to the masses. And I argue that we should use it and that there is no topic anymore that is off limits. So I want to just say thank you so deeply for the time that you have afforded me. My heart, my goal more than anything was to try light a fire up your ass and get you thinking, get you questioning everything for the good. I believe that every topic, every discussion, every point of learning is now officially declared open for questioning. I wish you nothing more than health in this time. I wish you nothing more than rebirth. Don't get put off by the idea that pain is bad. Pain is a precursor for growth, and the things that we had to go through in the last 2 years with COVID, and I speak from personal experience, were needed for this world to shift into a new space where we were experiencing a winter. The last 18 months have been winter. I believe more than anything, we are starting to see the shoots of spring and a new time into summer, but only for those that are willing to do the work. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mark Sham. I want to say thank you so much for giving me the space to talk to you. Please connect with me on social channels. I use these channels to educate, to entertain, and to add value and not to sell. These are my channels. I want to say thank you very much to everybody for having me, and I really wish you nothing but the best.
Mark, thank you very much. That was really, I loved your explanations. They're fantastic. You bring it all together for us, and I think that you know, this adapt or die, call it a cliche, whatever, but it's never been truer than now. And the thing that really struck home to me was this: how quickly you can become irrelevant in a business environment, and unless you are able to adapt and change at a rapid rate. And the same will go for businesses who have that ability to change and adapt will be the businesses of the future. Those who don't and are not able to will not be part of our future. And I think what you've highlighted is what COVID did was it accelerated change within our environment at a rapid rate, which really thrust people into a mode of adapt or die. And I think that's really what's happened. I suppose the big question is the rate of change going into the future going to be as quick as it is right now?
Yeah, look, I think certainly the rate of change that we're experiencing now and ahead is just going to keep increasing, because again, the thing that drives change is human beings' abilities to share information with each other. And so we're seeing more democratic access to the internet, technology. The more technology evolves and the more every person in the world has access to technology, this means more and more people are starting to play in the pool of life. And so they are starting to share information with each other at a faster speed, and we are building on top of each other's thoughts, ideas, and technologies. So I think the rate of change is going to continue to increase, but I think with that, you're going to see some incredible changes. One of the craziest things I think about a lot, David, is this fact that we are starting to kick people out of companies at either 60 or 65. You know, this is at a time where people have some of their best experience. They have the most value to offer to the world. Talk about outdated thinking. And you know what's starting to happen in the data is that people who are getting kicked out of companies because they've reached retirement age are starting to kick off and create immensely powerful businesses. And so we have this thing as human beings, is that we love to ignore the unintended consequences of life. We love to ignore the universal truth. We are not adapting, and you can see it. And so you will just see the gap widening between those who do the work, those who either see themselves as, I'm here, I've arrived, I know everything I need to know, I'm fine. As soon as someone says I'm fine, they're actually in trouble. And when they say they're fine, it happens slowly at first and then swiftly. And I can't think of a more psychologically damaging thing to happen than to be irrelevant. And I can't think of a more rewarding experience to add value late into your life. And so I think that's where these rules are changing.
100%. And I love the analogy of learn, unlearn, and relearn, because to me, learning is what's going to make us going into the future. And yeah, you may have to unlearn and relearn a lot of things. Mark, from my perspective, and I'm sure for everybody out there, wow, thank you for a great talk. Thank you. It was motivational for me. It was real. And yeah, I think you got some fantastic messages through to everybody. And just for everybody out there, if you did miss either Ryan or Mark's talks, these have been recorded, and you will be able to access them through our conference venue, which is also a new age of thinking, and Expo, which is something of a difference. You know, you can sit at home, you can enjoy yourself going to an expo, listen to talks in your own time. Wow, who would have ever thought of that? Okay, that this is going to be the new normal. And you can
I just want to give you guys a heads up, and I just want to congratulate you guys for taking that leap, for experimenting, for not being scared to get it wrong. I think it imperfectly embodies the message I was trying to get across. It is almost irrelevant how the experience landed up being in the end. It's that you took a stab, you threw darts at the dartboard, you weren't afraid to get it wrong. And I can't salute you guys. I'm not saying you got it wrong. I'm just saying there was a chance that when you put it out there, it could go wrong, and you did it anyway. I think that is highly plausible, and it sets a perfect example for all the other people watching this.
Yeah, I think, thanks. That's really nice of you to say that, Mark. And I think that, you know, by the number of people who now have access to the kind of talks that we've made available, you don't have to get in your car, you don't have to get a day off work, you don't have to miss out on anything. We've now suddenly we would have had, say, maybe 150 or 200 people at a conference. We now had 1,300 people go through the conference in 2 days. And wow, and we've still got 3 days to go, by the way. Ryan said today was the last day. It isn't the last day. The conference only ends on Friday. So you can access any of the talks, and the talks that we had today are live at any time, at your own time, going to the expo. And it's very easy to access through the internet. And it's amazing. It's actually fun, and you can enjoy it. So yeah, we've changed the playing fields, and we've adapted. And I think that there are a lot of people who are adapting to the new message.
Absolutely. And it's just a constant, never-ending cycle. And the sooner you I guess, develop an appreciation and an enthusiasm for the grind, it's a lot like entrepreneurship. You know, you have to develop an enthusiasm for the ever-changing world. Otherwise, it will wear you down. And so how you frame everything really does matter. Well done to you guys, man.
Thanks, Marks. And I think it was exciting, and I think your talk is exciting, and I'm excited about the future and what the future holds for all of us. Thank you to everybody out there who's listening and who's going to listen, to both Mark and Ryan, and to Chris and Elman. Thank you for your ingenuity in terms of making this all happen the way it has. Thank you very much, everybody, and what a wonderful 2 sessions, and we look forward to seeing you online. Thank you very much, everybody.